pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me. How you would respond to me?
The first question I'd ask is why.
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say, we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God. So we kind of have to stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI. Worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
WESN.
All right, Sean Michael Smollett, this is Talking Point. I know, of course, the continuation of the saga, the military buildup, literally that's our, how we tagged it, continues. But I'll save that for later on the show. I don't necessarily want to open with that and spend too much time on that topic, even though there is some new developments and I have some new observations, although I'm not necessarily going to say it's all good or it's all bad. It's still up in the air. But in the meantime, let's not forget our actual domestic issues that we can control. They're still ongoing. But before we necessarily get into some of these specifics, and I have two big stories that I didn't get to yesterday that I will ensure that I do today. A couple other things that came up that I think is food for thought as we move forward in this new 2025 landscape. It's one of those weird things where growing up at the time period that I did, born in the 80s, you know, primary school, secondary school in the 90s, and then trying to figure out life from the early 2000s on. It's kind of weird being here for all these different iterations of society, and now with the internet and social media, now the new thing is AI, and it's kind of funny in a way to watch how people, as a society, we don't understand AI. People understand AI, but then when you put us as the mass collective, does the mass collective have a mass consensus and understanding of things like AI? And the answer to that is probably not. There are risks, there are benefits, and there are basic neutral uses that for the most part, it will only be a benefit or a detriment depending on your capacity. But at the end of the day, you can't doubt that AI, a controversial topic, has started to come now into the regional and national conversation. The Prime Minister of Barbados has issues with AI and is concerned about recolonization. And at first, that kind of sentiment, recolonization through AI, that kind of sentiment, a very direct and a bit speculative, usually I won't agree with, right? And to some extent, I don't know if I like utilizing that term recolonization, because then it loads the situation with more emotion than I think warrants. Because colonization colonization is a specific thing that speaks to a combination of different emotions and measures, exploitative, etc., but also for what reason? And then to what extent do I even necessarily want to view colonization in terms of race? Is colonization a racial thing or a territorial thing and an economic thing? And the racial thing is secondary. A lot of people won't agree, but it is what it is, right? Don't necessarily care about that debate. But the conversation about if AI could be utilized to exploit people, now that's a bit more specific in a more practical dimension that I think are concerns that are warranted. The thing about AI is, at the end of the day, everybody, including foreign governments, are at the mercy of developers until or unless at some point in time those governments decide to either highly regulate and peer behind the curtain. And in the case of social media platforms, they have not necessarily been able to fully look unobstructed behind the curtain with regards to things like Facebook and Instagram. There's a lot of metadata and a lot of the inner workings that these companies try to keep secret, in part because the privacy of users, and to some extent AI having private users, there will be some expectation of privacy that will shield these AI companies from certain requests from any government. At least, you know, not necessarily giving it easily or upfront, depending on cause, and you might need a court order, a warrant, all of that, right? The thing about it is private enterprise, at the end of the day, and you see this is human nature. This is not an American thing. This is not a white man thing. This is not a rich people thing. This is human nature. There will always be a subset of humans, regardless of what their socioeconomic, racial, religious, or geographic location, whatever it is, there will always be a subset that's diverse, that you can't predict, that will exploit their fellow human beings. And now the question is, the private sector, to some extent, is a systemic formalization of that. At the end of the day, private sector is about efficiency and profit. And then there will always be a group in the private sector that will want to exploit. The problem, of course, is you might think, oh, well, why exploit? That's bad. There's shades to this. And the exploiter themselves don't necessarily always know when they start to go down the wrong path in pursuit of their own individual profits. So AI tools, they have their uses, but ultimately speaking, you're kind of trusting that the answers that you get, the output that you get from the prompts are going to be on the up and up. And it's not always necessarily going to be on the up and up for various reasons. Some of them is that the AI could just get it wrong, could make a mistake. The AI might misunderstand the prompt because at the end of the day, it's not an actual intelligence. It's just a combination of code that's responding to whatever it is you ask it to do. And there have been anecdotal incidents of AIs kind of making things up in order to make an answer, or not necessarily obeying the instructions, and the answer that you get are not within the parameters that you need. And then it's up to the user to figure that out. But like I said, there's at least one case I know. I don't know, I haven't corroborated the source, so I don't know how true it is, where a lawyer got an answer that was made up, and it got him in trouble. AI is being used to write all sorts of academic papers and the like, all sorts of projects and the like. So then now if a government tries to use AI tools developed by a private corporation, can it be exploited? And I think this is to some extent one of the fears of Prime Minister Mia Mottley, that now the flow of information or the control of information will go from media to AI tools, depending on if society gets too comfortable and starts using AI instead of search engines. Because in the past, you used a search engine, you looked up what the articles were, you looked up what the Wikipedia entry was as a starting point, never as a source. You look up whatever other reference pages they might have on whatever topic, maybe the official company page. If it's a product that you're trying to look up, you might look up various review pages, various online retail pages, etc., etc. Like I said, you could look up news pages, you could look up YouTube videos, but the point is you're just searching for it. But now AI tools are integrated into search engines, at least with Google, and it will give you an answer. The answer is not always correct. The answer sometimes is technically wrong. The answer might include, I've looked up things about Trinidad and Tobago law before, and I've gotten answers that when I check and see what the source material that the AI tool is referencing, it's not Trinidad and Tobago laws, it's not Trinidad and Tobago article, it's a foreign article about a foreign law from a foreign jurisdiction. So it has to be wrong. Because even if we have the same law here, I don't have the source. I have an answer generated from a foreign law. So I don't have the source, so I can't corroborate that it's correct or not. So I have to assume it's wrong. And I think it's things like that. That just is the starting point. Because, of course, there's always conspiracy theories about who controls the media. And to some extent, the media is not always directly controlled by somebody, but almost all the times it's indirectly controlled by various interests, right? There might, every now and then, somebody might have a master plan and try to manipulate the media wholesale. But I would argue that the vast majority of the time, there's a lot of informal, indirect, you can't really trace it to any one agenda, because there'll be various competing interests and medias and industry at the end of the day that at the very least needs to survive. AI right now isn't so much worried about profitability. Their money is probably going to come from venture capitalists who are hoping to get a return on investment down the line. So they don't necessarily have to worry about cash flow and things like that. They just have to worry about trying to have the best AI product in order to attract the most investment and to keep the company growing and to keep the product improving and growing in scope, scale, and ability, so that whatever the market settles into be, they are best positioned to lead or have the most market share, have the best product to get the most market share, etc., etc. So I understand people already have concerns, people already have conspiracy theories about the media being controlled. And like I said, I don't think that direct control overall from one agenda, it's not that easy, right? You could influence a lot. But at the end of the day, the media is ultimately a lot of people making individual decisions. Sometimes it's not that they're under control, it's that they allow themselves to be influenced because human beings love to follow the herd. Not everybody is an independent spirit that wants to go against the grain. But the thing with AI is, how many AIs are there? And then from that, let's just say you're the American government or the Trinidad and Tobago government or the Barbadian government. How many AIs would you actually utilize? Well, you might only utilize the AIs that are developed from nations who you trust. So that's basically half the world, right? If you prefer the Western world, will you trust anything that China develops? If you prefer China, would you trust anything that the Western world develops? So that cuts it down. And any day, right now, media is one of those things, one of the things that makes it hard to directly manipulate media is because it's so spread out. The internet has done that. Back in the day when, it was television, that was it, there was no internet. And there wasn't even cable TV or satellite TV. Back in the day, it would have been a lot easier to manipulate the media when there were limited TV stations. I mean, at one point, I believe TTT was the only TV station in Trinidad and Tobago. How do you manipulate the media? Well, one TV station. It's a lot easier than now, where not only do you have all the TV stations and all the radio stations, but talk radio stations in particular, but also you have various social media influencers and YouTubers. It's hard now to clamp down on any narrative artificially. It's not impossible. But with AI, that wide scope narrows. And for the Caribbean, we don't have, as far as I'm aware, any local AI being developed. And now the question is, to what extent should we? And perhaps one of the things about the colonization aspect is, if we are using a foreign product tailored for foreign needs, to what extent is that indirectly going to influence our culture as we try to conform to utilize that foreign product? Just take fast food, for example. How much fast food is foreign, how much fast food is local? So we conform for the foreign fast food. Our taste conforms to it. One of the interesting things is the fact that a lot of young people don't realize there was a time when you couldn't get McDonald's. You could see McDonald's on the TV screen, but you couldn't get McDonald's. That was like a fantasy. Now it's still a fantasy because it's so bloody expensive. Not everybody could afford it, and I don't understand people who like to eat from there regularly, to be honest. AI tools, to what extent do we trust this new thing? Do we trust the people who actually control it? Because that's the other thing with AI. With media, there'll be a lot of individual decisions that have to line up in order for the output to come out, right? You have the producers, you have the various personalities, cameramen, directors, executive producers, editorial chiefs, etc., etc. And that's just within the media house itself. Then, of course, they have all of the other stakeholders, all of the other collaborators, all of the other analysts, interview subjects, public engagement, etc., etc. But with AI, that's you to the AI. And the company doesn't have to justify its decision to its own internal stakeholders, its own employees. It just needs one guy to manipulate the system however it wants to. And that will affect the output for all users because it narrows down into a lot fewer channels, making it easier to control. The scope isn't as wide. So this is one of those things to pay attention to, because at the end of the day, all of us in the Caribbean are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And we're not the only ones, of course. Places like Mauritius, Seychelles, small nations around our size. Anywhere from those microstates to over 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 11 million, I think, as in Haiti. We all have similar issues. Maybe if Haiti had a proper economy and didn't have all the challenges it had, its sheer size will allow it to develop certain things that the rest of us, that the rest of the nations in the Caribbean aren't big enough to develop. We don't know. Population size. But we can only say what if. In the meantime, the fact remains, there will always be things we can't do for ourselves, and we'll be dependent on foreign nations to do it for us. We can't necessarily build all the electronics and cars and modern technology for ourselves. We just can't. At the end of the day, there's only so many cell phone manufacturers. It's not like every nation has them. So our small island nation region, how are we going to manage that, right? Ditto for car manufacturing, aircraft manufacturing. We will always be dependent, especially for high-end technology and cutting-edge technology, for companies abroad. So now the question is, to what extent is Prime Minister Mia Mottley's concerns about recolonization? And granted, you know, again, if you you could debate the semantics because that might send us down the wrong direction. But at the same time, look at TNT. I would argue our culture is more American now, the more integrated we are than ever before. There was a time when a lot of people didn't even have access to satellite TV, much less cable. So to what extent did American culture influence them? And now we're influenced by many cultures, but America is the biggest one. So are we better off for it? Are we worse off for it? I would say the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But that is, in a way, a form of recolonization. Our culture has been, to some extent, subverted by a foreign culture. The trick is, we opted into it. They have their culture for whoever wants it, but we opted into it. We wanted it. And now AI tools will really just be another step in that direction. I wouldn't say it will be the thing. This is why when you hear certain failures of our, how to say it? Well, like with the archives, our certain failures in protecting, maintaining, and continuing our heritage. You know, you'd have to wonder if this is also another situation. It'll be death by 1,000 cuts, and we won't really realize how much of our identity we've lost just in the last couple decades. Because, like I said, I was born in the 80s. I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s as a child. To me, TNT felt very, 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 very different then than it does now. And you know what? Maybe that's an old man thing, you know, get off my lawn. Like, I don't know. But dare I say, a lot of people might have a similar experience where when you look back, the old-time days are not automatically better. You know, we take it for granted how much better off humanity is in modern times, at least pre-COVID. But for our nation, looking back, pre-1990, and even after the coup, but before, say, the early 2000s, and even maybe during the early 2000s, although that's a little bit iffier for me. But definitely in the 90s and the 80s, like it just felt different. And to what extent is it a real difference that I am observing? In part because, hey, that's when cable became widespread. And then that's when the internet came. And we had more access to more foreign content, for better or worse. Meanwhile, just to kind of wrap up this little soliloquy here, one of the things that we as a society are not necessarily prepared to answer properly is, what do we want out of our press landscape? What do we want it to be? A former independent senator, Suniti Maharaj, she's pointed to the suspension of government advertising as a press freedom issue. And I want to say on this, she is right and wrong. She's right in a very practical sense, because government spending and political spending was a big part of media budgets. Never was really a part of our budget, maybe because we don't conform to editorial control, I don't know. But we know because we have people in the station with industry experience, and you know, you hear things and you talk to people, etc., etc. And you also make observations, and you hear certain rumors that, hey, there is political influence on certain other media houses. Regardless, not having government spend, it does take money out of circulation in industry. The problem I have with the statement, though, is that I don't like it on principle. If you rely on the government to be a significant part of your money, now if it was PNM, UNC financiers pumping money into the media landscape, then at least it could theoretically be balanced. But if it's government spend, what does that say? It says the media industry will be beholden to some degree or another to the government of the day. And then could you really have independent journalism because of that? One of the things, at the very least, I don't know to what extent there were changes in TTT, but it's state media, right? To what extent do they provide certain reporting to the public? I'm just going to put that out there. You could come to your own conclusion on that question. Ideally, the media industry would not need government funds. One of the other things is when you get to like what's going on in the UK, where there's literally like a tax or a levy or whatever for the BBC. But then the BBC, with this guaranteed income, kind of becomes an institution unto itself that heavily manipulates ideology in the UK at times. To the point where a certain subsection of the British public is upset about the BBC because the BBC is taking public funds and it's not being unbiased, they're being very biased. You could be biased if you're private. If you're private and you want to be biased, that's fine. If you're taking public funds and you want to be biased, that's a problem. More importantly, it's kind of hard to prove that you're unbiased if you're taking public funds. And if the media is supposed to be, you know, the fourth estate, one of the pillars of any democracy, but it relies on government funds to keep it alive, that is a conflict of interest. So then we reach to the point now, as a society, to some extent, we need to ask what we want of our media landscape, because the former independent senator is not wrong. On a very practical level, you can't deny money out of the system. Media industry is going to be under more stress and pressure than before. I'm just saying, I don't think it should be that way. But then now a solution is not readily apparent because the private sector is not strong enough or doesn't care about independent press, journalistic freedom. In fact, to some extent, one major fraction of the private sector controls its own media. So we're in a tricky situation with regards to this. Because if we're not careful, we could get our entertainment from abroad. We could even we could exercise that part of our activism brain or our ideological brain by following foreign politics, international politics and foreign domestic politics. But at the end of the day, for local issues, we still need local media. For local news, we still need local journalism. And if we're not careful, they will eventually contract. Every now and then there are new stations coming on. You know, you hope for the best. You know that they're going to be under some amount of pressure. And at what point will the situation stabilize in the long run? I don't know. And I'm afraid that it will eventually stabilize at a point where it'll contract and there won't be a lot left in order to do the necessary work to hold our politicians to account, which there's a lot to hold to account, regardless of who's in office. Just this US-Venezuela thing and all of the debate out of it and all of the narratives coming out of it, to me, just kind of shows deficiencies on both sides. But it's not enough that some of the population might be able to identify the same things that the press identifies. But rather, you need someone to start the conversation, to put the conversation out for the public to have readily available, to challenge the public. And at times you challenge the public and the public wins. But you still have the conversation so that the process is more robust, so that the dialogue is more robust, so that the conclusions, therefore, are tested, tried, and hopefully true, and are stronger than if we just kind of assumed things and hoped for the best. And in a culture that is laissez-faire, that is more than willing to shelve issues and not deal with them up front and directly, that likes to put their head in the sand, that likes to avoid open confrontation and conflict, because we don't understand conflict doesn't necessarily just mean fighting. Confrontation could be a debate, and if you're mature, you could have a constructive conversation in that debate, as opposed to an antagonistic argument where everyone's only looking to win, not actually trying to get to the truth. But if we lose the media, then whatever we have of that, you might say we don't have enough of it, or you might say we do have enough. We might even exceed expectations, regardless. If the media industry, if anything bad happens, that we'll lose too much. And then the next question is, what do we do to get it back? Because once we lose too much ground in the local media industry, the eyeballs will get too comfortable, more than now, of ignoring the local media industry, whatever is left. And then potentially, the advertisers will also abandon the local media industry, whatever is left. And then comes the question, will it ever retain? It might. Trends have a way of course correcting, but there's no guarantees. The new normal could be we just consume foreign media and we remain ignorant of our own local news, and it is what it is, right? And then we won't have to worry about AI recolonizing us. We'll recolonize ourselves. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into daily review. Stay tuned. No Karen to share today. Unfortunately, she can't make it, but the conversation continues. To be honest, I'm very interested in what she might eventually have to say, maybe, on everything that's happened within the last few days. Stay tuned, though. This is Talking Point at WSN. We'll be right back after this.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world. Diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Welcome to ASTI, Advanced Solutions Technical Institute. We offer hands-on training in drone technology, fiber optics, hybrid, security, business support, and more. Our programs are built to equip you with real-world skills for today's evolving industries. Get certified, get hired, and take your career to the next level with ASTI. Call 778-2135 or email info@astitnt.com. ASTI, where learning meets opportunity.
KDM Health Limited says, test yourself for STDs in the privacy of your own home. Our self-help test kits for all STDs are available at our wholesale office in Chaguanas. Call 283-1423. Visit our website at www.kdmhealtht.com or email us at kdmhealthlimited@gmail.com to place your orders. Available at all health institutions and pharmacies. Contact us for a free list of products and prices.
So one of the stories this week, of course, we have local issues that's still ongoing, and you have to be under a rock to not know that there are certain detainees at the army barracks at Tetron. Here's the thing. A prison officer, apparently with links to one of the individuals, Raji Ali, most recently apparently has been detained under detention order issued against him under the state of emergency. Now the thing, before we get further into that, prison officer, apparently he might be a prison superintendent, the thing looking to infiltrate Tetron, that leads to the question that I had from the story that I had originally earlier in the week, which is with regards to what exactly is going on with these breaches. We got a report, I believe it was yesterday, Raji Ali was apparently still able to communicate outside. One of the interesting things out of this report, and I think this potentially is an indicator of what the government is saying, is that under the preventative detention orders, Raji Ali is identified as the leader of the radical Islamic criminal gang, and the report goes on to say multiple media houses reported that Mr. Ali has gone on to conspire with the GR8 gang alliance. So the GR8 is not his gang. He has a gang. This is an alliance of gangs. This is organized crime. This is a syndicate, right? To what extent are our gangs themselves organized? To what extent is this further alliance a very formal, serious enterprise, or just a loose thing with a lot of guys that drinking and smoking too much, going off half-baked? But at the end of the day, the state national security apparatus sees enough to formally identify it, the GR8 gang alliance. And the point is, somehow he is still communicating from Tetron to get the message out. This is the quote: to eminently carry out targeted killings of law enforcement officers and other public officials in public spaces using high-powered rifles, and to traffic in the prohibited articles within the maximum security prison. Okay, that was, I think, the original PDO then. But the point is, they're still saying he can communicate outside. He has been able to communicate and engage in gang activity despite his incarceration in the NSP and at Tetron, and it's an immediate threat to public safety. His further detention is necessary. A new detention order was given out. One of the things with the new detention order is, I believe his treatment now is different because he's going to be reclassified. He was in custody pending trial. He was essentially, I believe, in remand. He was not convicted yet. But now he is detained formally under the SOE, not just relocated. So his status has changed as opposed to before, where it was more like his location just changed. And yes, to some extent his status changed too, but his location just changed to an army base. And now, if he is still able to communicate from an army base, and last night I saw something on the television, I can't remember where, and I can't corroborate it, so, you know, make of that of what you will, where it seems as though the soldiers, they don't even communicate with the prisoners. So that you may have prison officers there, but the point is, it's not like the soldiers potentially are the point of vulnerability. So is it correctional officers from MSP or other places who potentially were compromised, more or less, right? The prison service now is under suspicion if basically you have to remove these guys from the maximum security prison. Is it personnel from the prison service who are still directly dealing with the prisoners? Like, where is the vulnerability? The other thing is, unfortunately, and I do believe law enforcement officials brought this up, but nothing has been proven, so nothing definitive. You know, you can't make any even definitive accusations necessarily. I think it's mainly suspicion. Visitors will always be a vulnerability, right? Always. Not every visitor, whether it's the lawyer or family member, and I don't think these guys are allowed visits by their family, I could be wrong. Not every visitor is necessarily looking has bad intentions. But at the end of the day, there's the potential. So then, of course, now, the one visitor who, to some extent, you can't deny them access to without the entire criminal justice system kind of falling flat on its face, are their lawyers. And I don't want to say that their attorneys are passing on messages. I've always said it could be that they know that they're doing it. It could be that they don't know that they're doing it. He might just be saying, hey, tell Ma, blah, 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 blah. And when he tells Ma, it doesn't even have to be Ma, it could be somebody around the mother who hears the message and hears the code and decides, well, I'm just speculating here, but the point is, the lawyers could be a point of vulnerability, family members could be a point of vulnerability, but they themselves don't even have to know that they are. Regardless, the question is, where do we go from here? I believe there's a report where they want to increase the number of locations that could be used as detention facilities, including the Carrera prison on Carrera Island, the remand yard, or I think Golden Grove. But to what extent is that just, you're just shuffling these guys around and you're not actually improving the situation? Can we vet certain prison officers? Do we have a way to screen prison officers so we know all the prison officers can be dirty, but it's not whether or not they're all dirty. It's if we can't prove it, then effectively you might have to consider that they're all compromised. So where do you go from here? Because again, a prison officer with alleged links to murder-accused Raji Ali is one of the latest people to be detained, according to the order. He is an alleged associate of the radical Islamic criminal gang and other gangs. He has been confirmed to be providing support to other gang leaders and members who are incarcerated in furtherance of their participation in, involvement in, or commission of violent gang-related activities. A prison supervisor, Gouda, repeatedly facilitated the breach of prison security measures for the benefit of the gang members and has been trying to engage in further breaches at their current place of incarceration. Doesn't necessarily say that he succeeded. He is accused of accessing prohibited articles while at the Defense Force bases in Chaguaramas. He is the founder. This is the accused. This is the detained, the prison officer. He is the founder of the Male Mentorship Initiative Project Uplift. So again, you can't just assume, I guess, that people have good intentions. Hell, we don't know why he's compromised. Did he do it for the money? Was he threatened? Was his family threatened? I don't know. So they're looking to adjust the legislation who can search officers. I don't know if that's going to be enough. The associations, because they're saying, I'm actively, this is another speaker, involved in reaching the Attorney General to see if our searching regimen can move from just superintendents and above to our supervisors, which include supervisors, assistant superintendents, superintendents, senior superintendents. So there's a wider catchment, a wider pool of officers who can conduct searches of our officers. Because once they're found with anything, trust me, I want them placed before a court of law, found guilty, lock them up. This is the new acting Prisons Commissioner, Hayden Ford. But to what extent is that enough? The association that say, don't just look at the rank and file, look at the seniors as well. And this person, the headline has him as a superintendent. The order identifies him as a supervisor. The report just says prison officer. But if he is a superintendent, and this is the problem. If you just say, well, okay, the prison service is compromised, use somebody else. If you don't necessarily have things in place to prevent and deal with the compromising of agents of the state, they'll just compromise agents in other services. We already know that there's some amount of corruption in national security, in the police, in Coast Guard. Don't necessarily know for sure to what extent there's corruption in the regiment, but we've had too many reports about members of the regiment involved in things, right? That could be anecdotal. That doesn't speak for the whole regiment, but to assume that the regiment does not have vulnerabilities for being compromised would be somewhat silly. So, but part of the thing is we don't know exactly what it meant. Just reading the initial stories, I was a little bit confused, to be honest, with regards to the reporting and trying to piece together what exactly happened from the various media houses. Ultimately speaking, they're speaking from the preventative detention order to say that there was a report on what actually happened. Did something happen? Was there a breach? I'm not entirely sure. But it comes back down to the question of, is Tetron and other facilities, how confident can we be that they are secure? And this is why one of the callers yesterday asked a question, and I think he wanted to go in a direction where it would be very difficult to speculate and even implement currently about foreign intervention or foreign assistance, not just advisors, but actual intervention physically in local national security matters. Could this be one of them? I did wonder, I can't remember if I said this on air or if I was just speculating myself, because there's a whole can of worms. There's a whole can of worms if you do this, right? There could be a lot of negative consequences if you do this. But the immediate issues, a solution. I'm not saying it's a solution we should implement. I'm just saying, as a thought experiment, if we have issues with gangs still being able to carry out, do they do in our prisons, compromise our local prison officers, what about a foreign setup? And I don't mean El Salvador. I don't mean sending them to El Salvador. Like, what if we had a Caribbean prison, a Caribbean maximum security prison? Find an island where things are relatively simple, things are not, you don't have the ability to influence the criminal networks around the region easily. The island itself is relatively peaceful, has a relatively simple way of life. It's not necessarily too large like Trinidad or Jamaica where things could be lost in the shuffle. You plop a prison down there, you seal it up tight, and then you staff it potentially with foreigners who are harder to compromise than locals. What does that mean? That can mean various different things. Foreigners, as in foreigners to the island it's on, foreigners to the Caribbean region. There's a whole host of variables, right? Thought experiment, people. In theory, that will solve the problem we have. It could create other problems. And then, of course, there's the whole legality of it, right? You would have to pass a whole set of laws, and that's one of the things with foreign intervention. At some point, if you want more, and if you want real physical, practical intervention on your soil, that is really tricky legally to do, because it just is, right? You might need new laws. That's a whole set of debates about rights, debates about sovereignty. It sets precedents about rights and sovereignty that could then have a snowball effect in a negative way in unanticipated directions with unanticipated consequences. So, all right, let's move on to the next story. This one is, so it's a little bit trickier. Should have given this more time. There's that whole thing with First Citizens Bank and the CEO resigning. But at this point, I'm not entirely sure what happened, what went on. Because former CEO, or current CEO, again, Karen WC, she has written to the planning minister, Kennedy Swarat Singh, seeking to have the record corrected on her quote-unquote resignation as she proposed going on pre-retirement leave. Essentially, she's been communicating over with regards to what exactly is her future, right? But more or less, it's some version of her going on pre-retirement leave before retirement. And retirement is not going to be now. Retirement is technically going to be a year or two from now, right? Depending on what's agreed upon. But she's reached that point, and she has a lot of vacation accrued, so she's going to use the vacation accrued, I believe, or maybe it's not vacation accrued, maybe it's just a pick up the job in the contract, pre-retirement leave. While she's under pre-retirement leave, technically speaking, she has not resigned yet. So there is that. Then, because to some extent now, there's this whole narrative that she resigned, and then what it did to FCB's stock price, and questions about what's going on with First Citizens Bank, and questions what's going on. Why did she resign? When she's like, did I resign? I didn't resign. I was... Now the thing is, one media house reported that she was asked to resign, which prompted her to communicate to the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Planning and Economic Development, who is also, I believe, a minister in the Ministry of Finance. There's a lot of ministers in that position, right? I won't comment more on it. Clusters. Proposing that she proceed on vacation leave for 2 weeks, return to facilitate transition to the group CEO designate, Jason Julian, then proceed on pre-retirement leave. That was apparently rejected. And there was more communications. One of the things I find it's interesting is some of it seems that the Minister of Planning and Economic Development is more at the forefront of this matter than the Minister of Finance. Now, the Minister of Finance is corporation sole. But there's one report where, let me get the headline. He is mum on her resignation and focuses on Forex fallout. And then the article goes on. Basically, he didn't necessarily want to, he sidestepped questions on the, you know, I swear I looked it up, but I looked it up yesterday and I'm probably mispronouncing it, but the Dabesi issue, that's how it was framed in the report, in this report, right? And he sidestepped questions and redirected it to the Forex issue, which you can do that. You should try to figure out a way to do it a little bit more gracefully and less blatantly. There's no way it won't be blatant that you're sidestepping. Well, no, let me not say that. It will be always obvious when you're sidestepping, but you don't want to make it too blatant. You know, that lacking of the grace to parry, you know, so that the questioner doesn't even necessarily know in the moment exactly how slick you are. If you can't do it that way, then I don't know, maybe just, I don't know. I'm kind of jaded with regards to politics and politicians and their ability to communicate to the press, if you haven't realized. At this point, disappointment just runs thick with me. Now, the opposition parties has basically said, and I do believe this is correct. If I'm wrong, you could correct me. They have come out to say that the government technically has no legal authority with regards to the CEO's position of First Citizens Bank, which means that if they asked her to resign, let's not forget now, when the Chief Justice asked a judge to resign, he got in trouble for it. Let's not forget, because procedurally, the court said that I was wrong, that undue pressure was put on IAS Caesar. To what extent could this be a similar situation? And when people want to complain, why are you getting on the government's case for? Well, this is one of the things that continues the theory, continues to support the theory of different sides of the same coin, because we complained when the PNM fired a central bank governor unceremoniously, lost that labor case and had to pay out, and now the current government fired a central bank governor unceremoniously, and we will wait to see if they lose a legal matter on that and if they will have to pay out. But it doesn't really, I wouldn't bet money that the government would win. Let me put it that way. And now we have an issue here where was she asked to resign in a manner that would heavily imply that she should resign? Because corporation sold, government has ownership of these shares, but it's technically still not a public institution. It's a private institution. So you kind of have to go through the motions like any other shareholder. Can't necessarily just sidestep propriety, depending on the situation, right? Now there are reports that government is moving to install a new board of directors. The board of directors, I believe, are supposed to be people who pick the CEO. The government looking to install a new board of directors. I would think that for me to believe that there's nothing to see here, the government should have been a bit more upfront. They should have learned from the CPEP thing and how Minister Parat handled that and not repeat that mistake again, except it seems like they repeated that mistake again. we did a thing, and now we wait and see if they're going to try and pull the justification onto the woodwork after the fact. But when you do it after the fact, now they might not feel the need to because the public outcry won't be the same. But if they do, after the fact justification always feels cheaper. Delayed affection, there's a saying in China, delayed affection is cheaper than grass. Well, a delayed explanation doesn't carry the same weight. It in itself might just be cheaper than grass. So, not that they are not necessarily, it's illegal for them to do it, but then it further lends weight to the narrative. This is politics as usual. This is not what the Prime Minister said would happen when she was campaigning, when she gave the initial public speeches. This is not when UNC wins, everybody wins. That's not what it looks like. And the inability to proactively communicate these situations, it makes it look like the same old, oh, they're swapping out their PNM people for UNC people. What else is new? And if you're going to do the same old, even if it's a situation where the actual reasoning is sound, it doesn't matter because the perception will be when UNC wins, UNC wins. When PNM wins, PNM wins, and we haven't moved away from that. And it looks like we never will. But what makes it worse is the PNM, they themselves try to have language of this type of thing, right? The opposition leader, I think, has been trying to steer her party to be more not combative. But the Prime Minister directly said it and directly promised it. And now they are allowing holes to be chipped into that narrative, whether those holes are real or just perceived. And I have concerns because it goes back to you can't have 3 different positions on a major foreign policy situation that is highly debated in the moment. And if you didn't know it would be highly debated, then that would be a very, very, very poor error in judgment that I personally can't excuse because the PNM brought it up on the campaign trail. Just calling Maduro a narco-terrorist was a big deal for Stuart Young, despite the fact that while he was claiming that the American government legitimized Maduro, the American government already went on the record in front of the press. I believe it was the international press, or it could be the national press. No, I think it might have been a foreign country. I can't remember exactly. It would have been the Secretary of State calling Maduro a narco-terrorist, which that kind of sunk Stuart Young's narrative in that issue, on that issue. But the point is, he made it an issue. So to think that this would have been under the radar, really? So I don't know what's going on. I really don't know what's going on because it actually feels as though the political capacity of our politicians, of our legislatures, the proficiency, the expertise, and the skill seemingly is reduced. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like to me because now I have to ask the question to the Minister of Planning and Economic Development. Let's spell it out a little bit now. He is also the Minister in the Ministry of Finance. Wayne Stage is also a Minister in the Ministry of Homeland Security while being the Minister of National Defense. Why did these things happen? There's a theory. They're there as the seniors to look out for the newbies. Now, in the case of Homeland Security, the newbie actually had to look out for the senior's relative. In the case of this situation with the FCB CEO saying, I didn't resign, why are you saying I resigned? And that she may have been pressured to resign, I do now have to wonder exactly what part did Minister Swart Singh, oh, I hope I am not mispronouncing his name, what part did he have to play in a situation that could lead to another lawsuit? What part does he have to play where Mr. Basie is basically now having to come out and say, whoa, The version of events you're presenting to the public, I don't agree with. This is not the same. This is not that similar, but it shades on. It kind of is within your realm. It's within your realm. It's not in the severity, but it's within your realm. To me, this could be within your realm, a wide realm, but within your realm of the ordinary general situation, where it seems as though you have to wonder, do you fully understand the government? This is now to the cabinet. Do you fully understand the limits of what you should or should not be doing in a situation like this? I'm left to wonder, do they know what they're doing in these situations? To what extent is their political agendas kind of overriding good judgment? I don't know, and I don't like it. I don't like the implications of what it could mean, but I don't know exactly what it means yet, to be fair, so we have to wait and see. But I'm seeing a pattern, I'm seeing a trend, and the trend is basically we're going back to our default position, right? It didn't even take a year where we're seeing similar types of behavior. It's just that it's not as bad as it was towards the end with the PNM. Maybe the new budget will give me different indicators and I'll have to change the narrative as I see it and what I'm presenting, maybe make some apologies, maybe make some course corrections. I don't know. At this point, I hope so. I hope so. I would love to be wrong about things like this. Please let me be wrong. We have Digger Martin on the line. We'll take the call. Maybe we'll take a break after the call, but we'll take the call now. Digger Martin, good morning. Call you on here.
Good morning, Sean. Digger Martin inside.
Yeah.
A couple of issues. I have really wondered why the home invasion in daylight, has not interfered with our psyche to support the stand your ground home invasion legislation. And I'm now looking at home invasion. Nothing was violent about it, with a former police service commission, the chairman, Ramesh Dirsaran. And it is on one of the newspaper, and apparently is a daylight home invasion at his property. And this is what he said, and it's amazing, eh? Dirsaran said while he was not particularly fearful after the incident, he felt the need to be more careful given the apparent brazenness of criminals. He further said he, however, questioned what could be done as people who took precautions with security devices and reinforced those could still fall victim to this. So he felt comfortable and not afraid. And the question I am asking, that disposition tells me that he might have been prepared if they open his door. And we as citizens have to be of the same psyche. We have to be comfortable. When they jump the fence and they come for us, we have to be in a disposition to clap back immediately and not be afraid of these brazen criminals. And I'm not juxtaposing that to a comment the former Prime Minister made, and he admitted he might have been fault and the cause of the rise in crime, because he admitted our places is really awash with blood. Lots of criminal activity. And that comment came towards the response to the present Prime Minister with respect to her support for the Americans and the narcotic trafficking strategy. And what he's saying, that, yeah, we have a lot of crime, we have blah, 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 blah. But I'm saying, why is that? Why did he allow it to happen? And I'm going to give you a couple of things that why I have to pin it on his chest. One, the day of policing, they didn't do nothing to those senior officers to fix the police service. You're saying that there are police officers. Two, we as taxpayers trying to find out what went on with the Brent Thomas issue. Policemen was involved, senior police. Who was responsible for that? Who senior minister or senior give the okay to go? Three, we have lots of situations now where you have a new commissioner of police who appears to be doing the job, prosecuting. He says he's not going to bury his head in the sand with respect to rogue officers. They have given him the responsibility and the resources, and he's going after. Why was that not happening under Fitzgerald Hines and the Prime Minister? And another issue, the DSS, 20 million was involved in the DSS. You bring some fat belly police from Barbados, nothing happened to that. The former commissioner, Gigi, said something was wrong with that, and he disciplined some officers that allowed the 20 million to go back to the holders. So all of that shows me that the former regime for the last years facilitated the collapse of the police service. And the last one, you put somebody who was fourth in the merit list. You make them police commissioner. So you appear to be matching up the system to some sort of agenda. And what is that agenda? Erla was not top of the merit list. They have lots of people. So what you was basically doing, confirming that I have always said, Peter's principle. You put incompetent people and we got what you wanted. I go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, Gola. Well, I think there's more to speak about with regards to indicators within the public sphere on police corruption or police inadequacy. But then that is technically separate to the previous administration's management of the situation. And yes, the appointment of Euler was a bad indicator, right? We literally, the results more or less, there's nothing with regards to the results to suggest success in any area as her tenure of Commissioner of Police. And then you basically are left with the observation that she was not picked for reasons of meritocracy. I would argue, I would ask the question, because I suspect, but I don't know for sure, was political loyalty a factor or something else along those lines? Because it seemed like when they were ready, they dropped her like a bad habit, right? I don't know for sure to what extent the previous administration approved or disapproved of Suzette Martin's investigation into former Commissioner Ayla Ewa Christopher, right? But essentially, the government didn't try to protect her then. They protected her to the press at times, which made them look very hypocritical and or incompetent. And that alone is where a lot of criticism starts. And with regards to Hines, why are these things happening under the new commissioners able to function? And it didn't happen under Hines because I don't think Hines picked the commissioner. And Gary Griffith was one, to some extent, independent, and they didn't like that. So perhaps one of the things that they wanted in a new commissioner was someone who wasn't independent. Not sure, right? We don't know for sure. What we do know was, I don't think Hines made a lot of the big decisions. Hines' problem was, he didn't really know what he was doing because he was not able to do anything. He kind of just allowed national security to happen as the wingman to Dr. Heath Rowley or Stuart Young, whoever else was assertive at the time. And it was kind of ridiculous because at the very least, you are supposed to be one, the government's point man on crime, right? You're supposed to be the point man, and a lot of that comes down to communication, managing expectations, listening, getting feedback. Seems like he didn't engage in these important leadership functions to the detriment of the perception of national security in the country. It is what it is. But I wouldn't blame Earl on him. I wouldn't blame Earl on him. Maybe he was a big party decision. We don't know what the split was within cabinet. We have St. James on the line. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Sean?
Yeah.
Yeah, how are you doing? Listen, based on your opening salvo this morning concerning, the government media conferences and so, I have two questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
One, how are the journalist reporters selected to attend the government media conferences? And two, have you, as a representative of WESN, ever been invited to attend these media conferences at the diplomatic center to try to engage government officials? Or is it that the same old journalist reporters there are not engaging or challenging the officials in any meaningful way? Let's know. Bye.
Thank you. I think it was different under the two administrations. With regards to the previous administration, at least at a time, you need to be approved because of COVID. I don't know to what extent there were restrictions before COVID, and then when eventually COVID wasn't a factor, or at least COVID was not considered a factor, right? But I do know initially, when Talking Point started, there were restrictions because, there were limited number of spaces available because of COVID. So, but it depended because the Ministry of Press Health Conference had certain journalists that the Prime Minister's post-cabinet briefings or whatever press conferences he had did not have. Now, the current administration, I do believe their post-cabinet meetings are open. I can go to them if I want to. It's one of the things where I probably should be going to them. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a journalist though, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure if I should go. There's a lot to consider with regards to that. I have never been invited, so in the areas that they have been restricted, I have never been invited. But at the same time, I've also never been ignored when I've asked a question, at least of the previous administration. So what I do know is that you do get ignored when you try to invite them to come to interviews. So to some extent, if I go to the press conferences, then does that kind of limit, because I'll be there at the press conference, then they'll never come on Talking Point, and that's one of the things that you have to consider, right? Unfortunately. With regards to the actual work of holding the government account, I do think the current administration has opened it up more, but then now there is the whole, are the press conferences regular enough? Who's at the press conferences? Why is the Prime Minister not at the press conferences more? Because that's one thing that I did appreciate from Dr. Heath Rowley, more often than not. And you could argue about you could argue with regards to how effective it was, not effective, but you could argue the value of his presence at the press conferences at times. Because there were times when it seemed like he was rambling and he was being overly defensive and he's being maybe even disrespectful. But at the end of the day, he was available and he took questions from the press. Sometimes his answers were very much appreciated. Sometimes there was value in his answers, but they were very combative answers, right? Not saying that there wasn't value, because it helps you assess the situation and gives you further context. It just depends on your interpretation of it. So that's where it gets tricky. So if people want me to go to these press conferences, then maybe I'll go. We do have a call on the line. Caller, good morning. You on here?
Hey, Sean Michael, well, good morning.
Morning.
I want to hear your thoughts on something. I saw something on the news last night that bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
It left a nauseating smell in my nose. So I want to know what is your take on this first, right? Now, the Minister of Legal Affairs, Saddam Hussein, was asked a question. The question is, now that you're wrapping up the consultation for the Stand Your Ground, how many PNM constituencies did you all have any visits in? And his response was to ask the opposition leader. Now that's a foolish response from me, right? But what bothered me is his last statement. They looking at his words were what? Our government and our people. And that, you see that our government and our people, I get a segregation kind of discriminating, kind of nauseating sense in my nose, because when they took the oath of office, the oath of office was that you have to be fair to all manner of people. Yeah. Without malice or ill will. So I want to find out who is the our government and our people. Because to my recollection, and I may be wrong, the UNC first introduced the bail bill and PNM supported it. And when the sunset clause had expired and PNM was in power, and the PNM brought back the same bill, the UNC refused to support. So for me, I don't understand our people and our government. Because this is Trinidad and Tobago, this is not Trinidad. And when these new politicians come in on stream, they must learn to think before they talk, because sometimes they just give off the wrong vibes. Yeah. And I, as a taxpayer, I take umbrage to that. And I know they're watching the program, because they do watch the program. You gotta be careful with don't get a sedition charge one of these days. And I'm serious about that. Because we see the mistakes. It's glaring. When the PP government was there, you could remember they had a gentleman, I think they wanted to put him in the Airports Authority. And when they checked his credentials, he never graduated from the university.
Well, I don't remember that, but I do remember the SIS director was a bit of a...
This wholesale change, we just finished up in modern. And as they rightfully say, the song is when UNC win. Only the UNC win, Trinidad and Tobago lost. Because I can't understand how you're taking competent people who perform it. And you want to replace them with your people. So the puppet master keep pulling the strings on. And our country is not going forward. You see all this, you'll replace this one and we get rid of this Dabasi. And the thing is, the lady was on her way out anyway, you take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're seeing a crassness and a lack of respect. And for me, that is why we are how we are right now. We can't say nothing about it, because Minister Hines and they perpetuated crime.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like us to follow the money. And when I say follow the money, I mean the persons who benefiting from crime. Because they import all this amount of cocaine and marijuana ain't cheap. And this is the campaign finance legislation is important. Have a good day, Sean. Good program as usual.
Thank you, Gola. Listen, what you just said there reminds me of, at least my interpretation of it, reminds me of my interpretation of the bilateral, quote unquote, crime talks that never happened. My argument was both sides said it was the other side's fault. And my issue was I did not see either side try to compromise, to make enough compromises to facilitate the meetings, right? I say this about the public with regards to assisting the police and the overall level of crime. It's the same concept. You're in a situation where it takes two to tango. Do everything that you're supposed to do so that when comes time to ask the question, why did this not happen, there can be no uncertainty that it's not your fault. So that's why I say, with regards to people helping the police. If you help the police but they don't do their job, it's the police's fault. If one party did everything they could and could show that they did everything they could, not just say and give lip service, to have the bilateral crime talks, then it would be the other party's fault. It would be clear. And in this situation now with the consultation, I do wonder if it's something similar. But it's not good enough if it's the case where there was a lack of cooperation. It's not good enough. I'll explain more, but we do have a call on WhatsApp, so we'll take the call first. Caller, good morning, you're on the air.
Okay, good morning.
Morning.
Yes, Sean, you do a very good program. To the caller that asking about you getting on to the
press conferences,
ministry and thing, the ministries. You should try and get into the ministry. I forget the name of it. Anyhow, yes, to the caller that called in and talking about, you see, some government will have the project. They project on what they want to do, and you cannot have people doing things against what you're doing. So they need to change your PS or your general manager and thing for them to do something, and it had to be in a good way, and they had to do things for you to get your result, what you want. You can't just say you go to parliament and the next time you go, yes, the PNM bring things, but they change wrong. Remember how much time they water down things and get it passed to get rid of, and it was not good laws. Anyhow, thank you.
Thank you, caller. I was going to make that point. The first one you made, the second part about the watering down, to some extent the UNC as opposition were not entirely blameless in that. But I was going to make that point as part of what I was just saying. It is not just enough that you are good at the job and you are productive. You also have to be willing, and this is where, you know, objectivity, neutrality, being on principle, doing the work. The government switches. Are you willing to work with the new government, right? And some of it could be you were good under what the old government agenda was, but your skills might not work with the new government agenda. So should the new government have the capacity to switch you out? But then also, and this is the perpetuation of the political environment and the expectations that we have, which kind of transcends each individual members and leaderships of the parties, where people themselves kind of conform to these roles, and one of the roles is, well, I'm for that side, so I can't be for your side, right? And then to what extent do you have to now change them out if you want effective work productivity levels happen? But here's the thing though. The other thing I was going to say before the call was, and I was going to link it back to what I said with regards to you have to do your part in order to then, if things go wrong, when the question is asked, why did this fall through, you could say it was me. I think with regards to the consultations, and this might not be the intention of Minister Saddam Hussein. I am, to some extent, trying to give him a little bit of grace, because this does make sense to me. This is the most obvious thing to me, right? Either they felt that they couldn't or they shouldn't, because a lot of PNM supporters in PNM constituencies are so diehard and, dare I say, more arrogant than even the politicians, it seems, at least in certain ways, that I don't know if the UNC felt they would have gotten the cooperation. Now, there's two mistakes there, or maybe it's one mistake, really. You still need to try. You still need to put your best foot forward and try to do the thing. And if it fails because the other side doesn't cooperate in whatever capacity, maybe they don't come out to actually do the public consultations, right? Or maybe you needed their help for something and they don't give you the help. I don't know what it is, I don't care. You still need to do the do. You still need to go through the motions, even if it's gonna fail, because that is to prove to everybody else we did our part. And this is where the current administration failed in that regard. Now, I can't fault anybody for saying that this looks bad, because at the very minimum, what this is weakness allowing a certain cycle of behavior to perpetuate. That's at its best. At its worst, it is racism and discrimination and a disregard for a subsection of the country. But I think it is more the former than the latter, because we kind of want to view things through the lens of racial politics, so every problem now becomes of race. That's one of the issues that I saw coming out of American politics and Canadian politics. The woke lens, because everything was about racism and LGBTQ discrimination. Everything. Yes, there is that, but that doesn't mean that everything boils down to that. We have a different racial dynamic here. It's hard to reasonably eliminate it. And that's one, so I can't say that Arima was wrong for feeling that way, and Arima is wrong for putting this in. No, he's right. He has a right to discuss it. He has a right to put it out there. I don't have evidence to say that he's wrong, so I can't say he's wrong. And the government should have done more to not put themselves in the position to allow that narrative to be crafted. I said the same thing about Dr. Heath Rowley and the opposition. The PNM needs to be careful to not put themselves in position for a narrative around them to be crafted in part by their own words, by their own utterances, and by their own track record, that they had bad intentions with the management of national security issues under their tenure. And I said that before I knew the Prime Minister was going to say something similar. So nobody think that I consulted or was a part of, or no. Two independent thoughts on the same topic. But the UNC is not immune to similar criticisms. And they are the government. So they are more vulnerable because there are more things that we have to hold them to account for. They're in charge now. Heavy as the head that wears the crown. You want to sit in the big chair and have the big responsibilities that come with the big authority, you're going to get the criticisms that come with it, just naturally. These are natural. San Fernando on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning, John. Hello?
Yeah, morning.
Yes, morning. You know, I was actually going to wait until Karen came to bring this up, because she wasn't here today, but I wouldn't bring it up. That's the same thing that Arima spoke about. It's something that has been bothering me. Now, is it that, and then Saddam Hussein came out and said, and I listened to your discourse just now, and to even think that they may not, what you said, they may not think they may not have gotten cooperation in the PNM constituencies. Let me say this. Nobody owns no constituency in Trinidad and Tobago. It is Trinidad and Tobago. And in the constituencies that the PNM won, tell me this. They do have other citizens there besides to have to class to segment the population by who vote for PNM and who vote for UNC is ridiculous. I ain't vote for none of them. Remember my stance. Why it is I couldn't have, because I remember I was waiting for the consultation to come to my area to have a say. It never came. Okay? It never came. And this is the problem. Is it that, and I keep saying as time goes by, we're going to see what really this government is about, you know. Is it that this is stand your ground with guns for UNC supporters only? Is that it? And that should not be it. What you have in a conversation, you're supposed to go to every constituency in Trinidad and Tobago. Everyone. But this issue, when I listened to the Prime Minister, and she has said it several times, they are taking this mandate that they got to abuse Trinidad and Tobago. That is the impression that I am getting. Because, let me say this. This mandate that was given to this government is for you to lead, or for you to govern. That is all it is, you know. But what they do is that they interpret this as, we give you power. The country gives you power. The country ain't giving you no power. The country gave you an opportunity to lead And that is what it is about. And that is where the politicians keep messing up in this country. They keep messing up in this country. Why? How come you wrapping up a consultation and you have not gone to all the constituencies in Trinidad and Tobago? All. That is ridiculous. However, I keep saying, it happened under Mr. Pandey. It happened under the last Tanga Prasad regime, and it seems to be happening here. They think they can only, that they could just make laws and govern Trinidad and Tobago with laws. And that is not how Trinidad and Tobago runs. You have to consult the population. This is a social issue. Home invasions are happening to only one set of people in the country. And that is why we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere in this country. In addition to that issue you talked about with the with Tetron and the stimuli infiltration. Why it is so you move the prisoners, you move these detainees from maximum security to a seemingly more secure area, and the same thing happening. It tells you what is the position in Trinidad and Tobago with law enforcement, and I'm saying law enforcement deliberately. You have all forms of law enforcement. You have the prison, you have the police, you have the Coast Guard, the Army, and you can't secure the people by moving them to what we would in quote unquote down by the Army, and there's still seemingly infiltration there. Actually, Trinidad and Tobago will fix itself. We're not at the bottom yet, because we still have a ways to go. But we're getting there very fast. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. And in fact, and this is where being able to look at an issue and being willing to speak on it with a bit more nuance matters. Because you could say, look, we need foreign intervention. So the simplistic argument is support the Americans right now. But then you could say, but we don't need this type of foreign intervention. And then we could go more detailed into what we think we need, what potentially we might want to see, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is we're debating that whole thing in a very simplistic manner, not realizing that the way how we're debating it could potentially close the door with regards to the actual crime fighting issues and the need for international help in a very real way, not understanding the further implications behind the implications. And that approach to problem solving is part of it. The other part is what you said. Politicians, they get into power and they exercise power and they enjoy power, but do they lead? And that's one of the reasons why Hines didn't lead. Right? Coleman Burt didn't lead. Barry Padarat, Minister Padarat right now over the CPF issue, he didn't lead. He made a decision. And then when it turned out to blow up in his face a little bit, he had to try and figure out a way to soften the blow the next day. Khadija Amin, one could argue with regards to flooding, she led. Right? This thing with FCB, they didn't lead. We switching on the board. Switching on the board is exercising power, assuming that you're not doing it in an illegal manner. Leading is going to the people, being upfront, explaining what's going on, explaining why, having the ability to communicate the whys, to justify, to show why it will make your life better, why this is necessary. Even more importantly, when it's a potentially controversial decision or a questionable decision because, with regards to proper procedure and law, is it allowed? Is there precedent for it? There's a precedent for firing the central bank governor and getting sued and losing the lawsuit and having to pay him however much money. That's what the precedent is. But they did it anyway. That's exercising power. That's not leading. Leading is not saying when UNC wins, everybody wins. Leading is showing in both your actions but also communicating how that will happen. And then with regards to communication, following it up. So with regards to consultations, that's why I said, at the very least, they cannot complain that they are being criticized unfairly because they did not do anything to potentially prove that they did everything they could to ensure that they could have consultations throughout the country. Because the point you made, I was supposed to make it, so thank you for reminding me. The government is the government of the country, not the government of the party. The government is the government of the whole country, of all constituencies, not just the government of those constituencies that supported them. This is how you go from getting Tunapuna to losing Tunapuna. This is how you go from getting Labre to losing Labre. This is how you set yourself up to lose everything that you gained, and you go from, what, 2613 back to 1818 or 2018 or whatever. Because it's almost like if they don't realize, to some extent, even if you don't like the PNM supporters in Diego Martin or St. Anne's or wherever, they're PNM supporters in other parts of the country. You want marginal seats. There are PNM voters that did not turn out in marginal seats. The math might be very different if they come out because they are looking at what's going on, and you cannot disprove the narrative of discrimination. You cannot disprove the narrative of political persecution. You cannot disprove the narrative of abuse. But I'll say that I'll attempt to correct you or modify what you said, Mr. San Fernando. I don't think they're abusing the country. But I think to some extent, there's a flip side. The narrative was, on the morning of the 29th, there was this weight lifted off of the nation. Everybody felt, Well, part of the reason why everybody felt that was because we had hope that we had a government that could actually follow through with all the nice things that they said. When UNC wins, everybody wins. But slowly but surely, there have been more and more self-inflicted errors, unforced errors, shooting themselves in the foot over issues that suggest that is not true. Nobody's doing it to them. They're doing it on their own. Remember, they're the government now. When the PNM made mistakes as the government, they did it themselves. The opposition could barely, keep themselves from tripping over their own feet. I've already gone into great detail how I think this opposition is not that effective. So I ain't gonna, if they're not doing nothing to you, you're doing it to yourself. You're setting yourself up to be perceived a certain way. So a lot of the middle voters will start to ask questions and start to look at you funny. Maybe not just yet, but then of course a lot of the PNM voters who didn't vote, they will start to have regret and they might want to come back to vote. We ain't gonna risk this again. There was a collective sigh of relief the morning after. But the flip side to that is people started to think it gave them license to crap on the PNM. I did not criticize the PNM because the UNC is in power and that was the vogue thing to do. I had specific reasons. I had specific things to say. When they said things that I felt hypocritical, I had specific reasons why I felt it was hypocritical. It wasn't just because you lost so you can't talk. It was because you lost because you didn't do this and you didn't do that and you didn't do that. And then it's hypocritical for you to complain about school renovations now when you were in charge of school renovations for however many years. And they now reach and they have to try and figure it out with your budget. As one example. You can't blame the current administration for the state of crime. This didn't happen in 4 months. We didn't get 600 murders in 4 months. So, I think they made the mistake. You see, the PNM made the mistake where their supporters are diehard. So it's like, well, we must be right because all people believe in us that much. Yeah, but the ones that voted, sure, they're doubling down on you. But a lot of people abandon you, but you haven't figured out how to reconcile that. The current government, it seems as though if there's a mistaken mandate, if, I would speculate that such a mistake would be in the sense that they got a mandate by their supporters, by the nation, which is a low percentage of voters, huh? So that's another reason why it's a mistake. It's not like they had a large number of voters coming out to support all of the things of the UNC and it's universal and they will, you know. But it's almost like if they think they got a mandate to abuse the PNM and to abuse PNM supporters. Because, hey, listen, I get it. It's easy. It's easy post that election to look at some of the PNM supporters and how arrogant they were and basically to dislike them or to call them stupid. It's easy. But at the end of the day, if you're the government of the country, all of that stuff doesn't matter. That's for opinion people. That's for the people, the debates on the street and in the rum shops. But you're the government of the nation. You're supposed to be representing everybody. The opposition represents the dissenting voice. The government's supposed to represent everybody. So you didn't have public consultations because you didn't consult with the public, not the whole public. It's an incomplete exercise. Is this what we're going to see? Here, I'll say this though. It's not like the PNM didn't do similar. It might not have been the exact same thing, but essentially it was very similar. And this goes back to some extent, Mr. San Fernando was implying this. I don't think he necessarily said it directly. I said different sides of the same coin. He said going round and round, top spinning in mud. I don't understand what is it about our politicians that they feel comfortable when they think they are winning on top of the world, they could do no wrong. We raised the price of gas, ain't right yet. Remember that? And now it seems like the UNC is falling into the same hubris, trap of hubris, where they don't, I don't know if it's because they just don't have the skills to lead. They don't have the capacity to truly lead. I don't know what it is, but they're making very similar mistakes to the former PNM administration. It's just that the level of arrogance is accelerated, and that's one of the things that has me extra concerned. Because to some extent, after like 2 terms, people are gonna get tired of you. That's natural, right? There's no way around that. But this seems like it's an accelerated situation, and maybe this is why the partnership, besides the very, very, very bad re-election campaign that they tried to undertake, this could have been one of the reasons why the partnership only lasted 1 term. I don't want to just assume it's a racial issue or it's political persecution. I just can't say that it's not. I can't fault anybody who thinks that it is. Because you, the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the United National Congress, have put yourself in that position by your own words, because you cannot say in the same breath with regards to a defensive answer as to why you're not consulting with people in PNM constituencies. You cannot use the phrase our government, our people, and not have yourself look bad. And I have never been in politics. I have not technically spoken on a political platform. So it might be very arrogant of me to say this, because I am by no means a proven expert in the fields of governance or politics. But damn, it really is something to watch amateurs go on a professional stage and muck it up. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. It's nice to be nice. And if we want this to change, we have to be willing to discuss things with our political opponents, the people who disagree and believe in different things than us, but we also have to be nice and respectful to them while we do so. Otherwise, the politicians ain't going to change. They are taking their cues from us. Stay safe out there. Stand your ground laws. I don't know to what extent it would help in the Professor Diosora situation, but I'll save that conversation for another day. The consultations are not complete. I think the law is probably going to end up being half-baked, and it ain't going to solve nothing, but I'll maybe go into that another day. Until then, do whatever you can to safeguard yourself. Not everybody wants to have to pull a gun in order to protect themselves, but crime is everywhere. And don't, for once, for one moment, think it can't happen to you. It can. I say so we can all see each other next time, but the reality is that's not always the case. But I still hope. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Advanced Solutions Technical Institute isn't just about courses, it's about creating futures. We serve every learner, from the new graduate to the seasoned professional, with engaging, supportive staff and tailored learning plans. Study in the way that works for you and gain skills in business, security, finance, telecoms, fiber optics, and beyond. ASTI, training tomorrow's leaders today.